I thought, this is perfect. It'll give my body time to recover from the long journey because at that point, I was experiencing extreme pain in my knees and in my legs and all over my body. I didn't quite understand why. I still don't understand why. I knew in my soul that if I didn't make this journey at this time in my life, my body probably wouldn't allow me to do it at any other time. I booked the flight. I was so excited. My husband was kind of ambivalent about me taking the journey, but he never expressed that he didn't want me to go. So I did. I met many angels along the way. My first angel was when I boarded the plane. There was this young girl. She was probably 12 or 13. I was terrified. It was my first time going overseas, even though I had sent my daughter to London, Wales, and Dublin, Ireland for a school trip. That way she could explore overseas, but I never had the opportunity. As a first-generation college graduate, it was a dream of mine for as long as I could remember to travel overseas and to experience a life that I'd only read about. On the plane, I sat next to my angel, but ironically, we didn't speak much to each other. We smiled politely and silently acknowledged each other during the long hours of the trip. Close to us arriving in Sierra, we started a conversation and she expressed to me she came to Sierra to spend time with her father because her father and mother had divorced a few years ago. Her courage gave me comfort to know that if she could do this journey alone, I, at the ripe old age of 41, definitely could do this journey. God gave me that reassurance. I knew that she was there to guide me and to bring awareness, a sense of comfort and peace about the journey. At that point, I said to myself, it was all going to be okay. When I landed in Spain, I immediately took a bus to Sierra. You have to actually fly into De Compostela and walk back to De Compostela. So once you arrive in Sierra by bus, you have to walk back to De Compostela. I didn't anticipate how long I would be awake just trying to get to the starting point of my trip where I could process all of my emotions. This part was a journey in itself. The plane from Montgomery, Alabama to Atlanta, Georgia to Santiago. Santiago was, oh my goodness, breathtaking to say the least. My body held up better than I anticipated, but I was tired. So once we got to the bus station, we headed to Sierra. I had been awake more than 24 hours. I quickly identified all the pilgrims who would be walking along the way with me. At one point or another, they were clearly identified by their backpacks. Most of them had already received their seashells, which is a clear indication of people along the way. The seashell was designed as a commemorative ornament of the people who were walking along the way. As you go along the way, you see the symbol of the seashell guiding you from one point to another. Once I arrived in Sierra, Spain, we first had to find the chapel where we would receive our Camino passports. The passport is designed so that you get stamps at each hostel you sleep in or each place that you eat along the way. When your journey ends, you receive your completion certificate. I was exhausted and needed a bath. The other pilgrims immediately started to search for the chapel. When we arrived, it was almost sunset. Before the wave of pilgrims started walking, we got our maps and we started the search for the first chapel. We were all thinking hopefully we can find a hostel where we could sleep for the night. Before we got there, my second angel, in retrospect, thinking about him and thinking about what he represented, came to me. He seemed almost mystical to me. I thought to myself that I was to tell someone about him, they wouldn't understand, or they would think you were crazy or telling a tall tale. I found myself in the midst of a crowd of people, and the next to me was a gentleman. Writing about him sparked a curiosity in me which didn't occur to me initially. If I had to describe how he looked, what it felt like, it would be hard because it was more of a feeling that accompanied his presence. He appeared to me to be an albino. His eyes were like ice, piercing ice eyes. He said he had taken this journey before, and I told him. He asked if I had taken this journey before, and I told him no, it was my first time. He said, I have taken this journey many times, back and forth, each time in a different way. When I came to a town, I observed how my spirit felt as to whether or not that is the town that I should stay in. I thought to myself, that's interesting, and what great food for thought. Something that naively I didn't think about before the journey began. As he talked to me, I noticed that the crowd was leaving me. As I continued to walk, I thought to myself, I must catch up with the crowd. Then I looked up, and in a flash, he suddenly was gone. I could see him just before he told me, I don't think I'm going to stay here in this town. I think I'm going to go to the next town. I wish I had taken his advice. I didn't. As I looked over my shoulder, I saw him in the distance, and I thought to myself, there's no way he could have gotten that far away that quickly. How did he get there? I saw him on a bike, looking at me as if to say, are you staying or are you coming with me? I continued to walk. I was walking further and further towards the hill where my fellow pilgrims were climbing. I can see them in the distance, hurting and in pain, trying to make it to the top. I started to walk, trying to catch up with them, walking up the hill towards the chapel. It seemed as if I just might get to the chapel before sundown. I could see the steeple on the other side of the hill. There was an elderly man who didn't speak English. As I stood and started past him, he immediately started talking to me. It was like I understood him. He started to weep, and he said to me, God bless you. It was as if God had already told him what was wrong with me, and he touched my knees and cried and prayed. I was full of the Spirit at that point. I almost couldn't breathe. I couldn't talk. I couldn't move. I didn't know what to make of it. I thought to myself, God, if this is what this journey is going to be like, I don't think I'm going to make it. I continued to walk lightly, trying to tell myself, you must go. I wiped the tears away from my eyes, and I tried to catch up with my group. As I reached the top of the hill, I saw the chapel to my right, and there were two men standing in the doorway. I walked over to them and asked them, is this where I pick up my Camino passport? They said, yes, you will be the last one for the day. I was so relieved that I was able to get my journey started that day. Having received my passport, by passport, I mean my Camino passport, from the priest and the man who was with him. I asked if I could enter the chapel because at that point I thought I must talk to God. I need to talk to God. I need to be inside of this chapel. I need to be able to sit with him and feel his presence more closely to make sure this is what he wanted me to do. They informed me that the chapel was closed and it would be opening early the next morning. As I walked away to look for the hostel to stay in for the night, something told me to look back at the chapel. I wanted to take a picture because I thought I needed to capture this moment. The priest and the man with him immediately turned away as if they didn't want their picture taken. I took the photo anyway. There was the stairs upstairs to the church that almost looked like someone was peeking out the window, but I thought nothing of it at the moment. While I was there, I asked the priest if they had a hostel nearby. He stated, yes, the church has one next door. I walked next door, and all of my fellow pilgrims who were with me, had already checked in for the night. I asked if they had room in the inn. Initially, the innkeeper said, no, we don't have any vacancies. Then I said, but I have my Camino passport, and she said, yes, come in. I paid the customary fee for the Camino travelers. The church didn't have a set fee, but what I read stated that you customarily give them what you would pay anyone to stay in a hostel. I was so grateful just to have a bed, a place to lay my head. I went in, claimed my place, went and washed my clothes by hand in the sink, took a shower and hung my clothes on the line in the laundry room downstairs. I was exhausted, too exhausted to even eat. I paid attention to my fellow pilgrims and watched to see what everyone else was doing. I could hear everyone in different groups talking about at what point they were going to leave the next morning. I wanted to get started on the journey with them. As I was purchasing all of my items for the trip, I recall I had a headlamp. After I picked up the headlamp, I looked back and there was another one. It was only $1. It was on clearance. I thought to myself, maybe I should just get one more in case the other one doesn't work. So I purchased both of them. That evening, I watched the elders in groups talk about how early they were going to get up. I watched the middle-aged group kind of enjoy drinks and each other's company. I watched the young ones just, hey, why don't we just go find a place that we can kind of hang out for tonight? I decided very quickly I was getting ready for bed and I was going to leave bright and early the next morning with the older group. I went to bed and in the middle of the night, I needed to go to the restroom. When I got up, God said, listen. Everyone was quiet. Everyone was asleep, resting for the night. Overhead, I could hear chairs screeching across the floor and children running and giggling. As I listened closer to see what was going on, it seemed as if someone was doing some type of religious ceremony. I was frightened to death. I didn't know what to think. It seemed like they were having some type of exorcism or seance. I thought to myself, I must be dreaming. There's a church next to here. I didn't know what to think. This can't be. God told me in that moment, get up bright and early the next morning and leave as quickly as possible. I got back in the bed, and before I could even rest my eyes, the elders were starting to rise and getting ready to go on the walk. The first day of the walk, I hurried and gathered all of my things. My clothes were still in the laundry, so I rushed over and gathered my laundry.